Hi folks, this is all the fruit at a steep hill above the beautiful Mediterranean city of Nice. I found another olive tree which is claimed to be a millenarian or at least 1,000 years old. Reaching this olive tree is very hard. Google gave me two different routes. I walked up half of the height of the hill. And both ended in gates, not in some garden gates, but in some really fancy mansion gates. And then I had to walk back down, and then I had to walk up through a horrible, almost vertical forest. Up here we have abandoned orchards. This forest was also an orchard, but hundreds of years ago. I got scratched, I almost fell. I'm dirty or something, so if you're trying to reach this millenarian olive, be careful. A lot of the hiking routes Google shows you will end up in the middle of nowhere. So let's assess the area here, because an old tree is a great thing, but an old olive tree is a very special thing. So here we are on a mountain top above the Mediterranean, and there is no lack of old olives. Olives are growing very slowly and they are being pruned regularly. So those things here, I don't know, man, maybe 200, 300 years old. There are more up there. Here I see quite an old one. This one could well be 400 years old. This one here, what, maybe 300? Of course, I'm guessing. To know for sure, you have to make a hole in them. And it has to be the first hole, because if they're already hollow, you cannot say anything. This here, this is on a totally different level. Look at it. It's what, 2 times, 3 times taller than the other ones. It's basically of the same aesthetics. It's not just a low white tree, but also quite tall. And it's super thick. The stem itself is maybe 2 meters in diameter here. But the base is about 4 meters, or what would this be? Not 15, yeah, like 13, 14 feet or what? And one pretty rare thing is that it's not hollow, but the original stem is still there. I guess the original stem died at the height of about 2 meters, but beneath it's still there. So in this rare occasion, if you had a drill, you could drill through it. You could count the rings. Well, good luck with counting the rings, because the wood inside is sometimes folded and twisted by some of the nice Mediterranean spoons or bowls they sell from ancient olive wood, and try to count the rings. Or you could of course do a C14 analysis of the central part. But yeah, not only a nice olive tree, but also a nice olive tree in good condition. And of course the local idiots, the local shit shows of I don't know what, are throwing rocks at it. Okay, they are climbing it, it will survive this, but they have thrown several rocks at it here. Folks, this tree, I don't know how old it is. There is no label, and I didn't check any sources on the internet. But this tree is much older and much more valuable than you. Well, at least than those suckers. Yeah. Other olive trees about as thick are usually being claimed to be 2,000 years old, and it's possible. I've seen older olive trees only in southern Italy, in Puglia. And Puglia was settled by the Greeks almost 3,000 years ago, and there are olive trees with a diameter of about 3 meters. Here in northern Italy and southern France, I haven't seen a tree with a diameter of more than 2 meters. And this area was settled by Greeks and Romans 2,000 years ago. So the olive tree came here around the time of the birth of Christ. In southern Italy it came around the time of, what, Moses. Well, so it is possible that this here was one of the first orchards that were founded when the Romans colonized the area, or maybe even before the Roman colonization, maybe in maybe this was planted by some Greek or maybe even Phoenician colony. It is possible that it's 2000 years old. So imagine this was planted around the time of the birth of Christ. Around the time of the Crusades, it was already much bigger than any of the surrounding olive trees. Around the time when America was not discovered, but let's say when Columbus stumbled upon America as a mistake, it was maybe basically almost the same size as now, maybe slightly smaller. And at the time the Declaration of Independence was signed in the US, since then this tree has probably not changed a lot. Well, maybe lost those two big branches, but not much else. Really ancient tree. Okay, ancient trees are great. But what's the special thing about olive trees? Well, there are two ways to tell where you are in a Mediterranean climate. Sometimes you are standing on top of a hill and looking down on the Mediterranean Sea, but you are not in the Mediterranean. How? I can walk there in like 15 minutes. Maybe you are somewhere at the edge of the Mediterranean. No, even in places like southern Italy or Greece or Turkey, it's possible for you to look down on the Mediterranean Sea and still you are not in the Mediterranean climate. There are two ways to assess the Mediterranean climate. Either you can have a thermometer somewhere for thousands of years, which nobody ever had, or you have two different trees. This is the wild holm oak, where wild holm oak forests, Quercus ilex, are dominating the area. You have Mediterranean climate. Wet winters, hot dry summers, almost never colder than minus 17 degrees, usually never colder than minus 7 degrees. But what if you cut down all the forests to plant olive plantations? Then you are still in the Mediterranean climate, because the olive is the other way to determine the Mediterranean climate. Olives only grow really well in Mediterranean climate. South of the Mediterranean, the Sahara is too dry. East of the Mediterranean, the Arabian deserts are too dry and too cold. North of the Mediterranean, the Russian steppes are too cold. Northwest and west of the Mediterranean, the Atlantic climate is just too wet. Look at that. Those people threw a lot of rocks at this tree. If I catch them, I will stuff their heads up their shitholes, really. Well, whenever you have an olive tree, you have Mediterranean climate. Olives are incredibly valuable, and so European colonizers have tried to introduce them everywhere where they go. Well, at first the Romans, when they colonized Gaul, they planted the olive tree here. Well, the Greeks, they brought it to Italy, then probably the Romans brought it to southern France. But then when the Romans colonized Germany and Britain and so on, they tried but failed. The climate is not good for it. Then later, Italians, and especially French, Spanish, Portuguese, they colonized most of the world, and they tried to introduce the olive tree everywhere. They failed in most areas, and they really tried hard for centuries. So for now we are sure wherever there are olives there is Mediterranean climate. And look at this. This is a 2000-year-old olive tree. So we can say that here we had really good, warm, typical Mediterranean climate for at least 2000 years. Ain't that amazing? At around minus 17 to minus 20 degrees, the stems of the olive trees, they literally explode. Well, every tree explodes at some temperature, like tropical trees will explode at 0 degrees. But like polar trees, they can stand up to minus 50, 60 degrees sometimes. In Bulgaria, when you have a very cold winter, you say that the rocks and the trees are cracking. They are cracking because of the water inside and because the tension that's created through the ice. So this tree, the stem didn't crack, didn't die for the last 2000 years. The funny thing is that even in such truly Mediterranean regions like Rome or Tuscany or the Ligurian coast, about every 40 years the olive trees die. Well, not the individuals die, but the individual stems die. And then those little suckers, the farmers basically let 1 or 2 or 3 of those little shoots here survive. Usually you cut them every year, but if the stem burst and died, you let a couple of them survive. you raise them, and you get olive trees. You get new olive trees. That's why in many Italian regions you don't actually have massive olive trunks, but just a thicket of arm-thick branches. But this year we are not in Italy, here we are in France, at the foothills of the Alps, at the same geographical latitude as southern Canada. And here we never had a temperature of colder than minus 17 degrees centigrade. That's still something on the positive side in freedom units, still above zero. So for the Americans, since Jesus was born, there was not a single night on this hill where the temperature even approached 0 degrees of freedom units. That's what this ancient olive tree tells you. It's a thermometer which shows you the temperature of the last 2,000 years. Ain't that amazing? I'm so honored and I'm so humbled by standing here. I've seen a lot of old olive trees. Well, not a lot. I've seen a couple dozen of olive trees of this size and age. But maybe just 4 or 5 where the original stem is still intact, where they are not hollow, but they are one massive trunk. And here some idiots are throwing rocks at them. You know what those spots where you threw the rocks will look like? After like 100 or 200 years, they will still be visible as such holes. You might die, your country might die. I hope that your genetic lineage dies. And still, those holes will be inside this olive tree just because you had this stupid idea. So folks, I'm really honored to see this olive tree. I didn't believe it to be that majestic. I didn't believe it to still have its original trunk. That's a very rare thing indeed. Look at this thing. It was probably planted at the same time Jesus was born. I love those things. Yeah, climbing this hill took me hours because I had to go back twice and walk up through the dense vertical forest. I got scratched up and dirty, but it was totally worth it. So folks, stay tuned for a lot more fruit videos and hopefully a lot more millenarian olive videos from the beautiful country of France. And of course, don't forget to like, share, comment and subscribe.